The car was found with the doors locked, no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no footprints leading away into the snow. Inside, everything looked ordinary. Empty candy wrappers, a program from a college basketball game, jackets folded in the back seat. But the 5 men who had driven that car into the mountains were gone. The road where it was found was not on the way home, not even close. It climbed into the Plumas National Forest, twisting through darkness, snow beginning to fall, temperatures dropping below freezing. They had no reason to be there. None of them were experienced outdoorsmen. And yet, for reasons no one has ever fully explained, they kept driving, deeper into the mountains, until the road simply ended. Months later, searchers would find what remained of their journey scattered across miles of wilderness. But the question that has never been answered is not how they died. It is why they went there in the first place. On the evening of February 24, 1978, 5 friends attended a college basketball game in Chico, California. They were ordinary young men with routines, families, and plans for the next day. They lived in Yuba City, about an hour's drive south. The trip to Chico was simple. Watch the game, eat something afterward, and return home. They were excited that night. One of them, Gary Mathias, had once served in the military, but struggled with mental health issues and relied on medication. The others, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Ted Wire, and Jackie Hewitt, were known as quiet, kind, and deeply devoted to their families. They had something important the next morning. A basketball tournament in which several of them were scheduled to play. Their uniforms were already laid out at home. Everything about their lives suggested they would be back that night, sleeping in their own beds. After the game, witnesses saw them stop at a convenience store. They bought snacks, chocolate milk, candy, soft drinks. Nothing unusual, nothing hurried. Then they got back in the car, and instead of driving south toward home, they drove east, toward the mountains. No one knows why. The road into the Plumas National Forest is quiet at night. No streetlights, few houses, long stretches where the only sound is wind moving through trees. At some point, the men continued up a narrow, winding road that climbed higher and higher into the mountains. Snow began to gather along the edges of the pavement. Why they didn't turn around is one of the first mysteries. The car they were driving, a Mercury Montego, was not built for mountain roads in winter. It had no snow chains, no emergency supplies, and yet the engine kept running. The tires kept turning. Sometime that night, the car stopped. Investigators later determined it was not stuck. The gas tank still contained fuel. The battery worked. The vehicle could have been driven away, but it wasn't. The men left the car behind. What happened next can only be reconstructed from what searchers later found. They walked through snow, in darkness. For miles, nearly 20 miles from the car, deep in the forest, stood a Forest Service trailer used by snowcat crews. Inside, searchers would later find signs that someone had been there. Food had been opened. Blankets had been used. One of the men, Ted Wire, was found inside, lying in a bed. He had survived for weeks, but much of the food remained untouched, and no one knows why. At first, investigators believed they understood the case. They assumed the men had become lost. Perhaps they took a wrong turn after leaving Chico. Perhaps they panicked when they encountered snow. Perhaps they abandoned the car believing it could not continue, then wandered deeper into the forest in search of help. Exposure and hypothermia could explain the deaths. Confusion is common in freezing conditions. People sometimes make irrational decisions, walking in the wrong direction, removing clothing, or failing to use available resources. For a time, this explanation felt reasonable. But as search teams studied the evidence, the simple theory began to fracture. The car was in working condition, the road was passable, and the trailer, where shelter and food existed, was close enough that at least one of them reached it. If they were capable of reaching safety, why didn't they use it fully? Why did some of them keep moving into the darkness instead of staying together? And what made them leave the car in the first place? The explanation of "they got lost" began to feel incomplete. Over the years, several theories have been proposed, each explaining parts of the mystery, but never all of it. One possibility is simple confusion and fear. It is possible the men believed they were heading toward civilization when they left the car. Darkness, snow, and unfamiliar terrain can distort perception. A distant light or reflection could have convinced them help was nearby. Once they began walking, fatigue and cold may have prevented them from turning back. This theory explains the long walk. It explains hypothermia, but it does not explain why the car was abandoned so quickly, nor why so much food inside the trailer was left unused. Another theory suggests human involvement. Some witnesses reported seeing lights in the mountains that night. Others claimed the men may have encountered strangers on the road, people who frightened them or forced them to leave the area quickly. If they believed they were in danger, abandoning the car and fleeing on foot might make sense in the moment. Panic can override logic, but there is no physical evidence of another group. No tracks, no signs of violence near the car. And if they were running from someone, why head deeper into the wilderness rather than back toward the highway? Then there are the more unsettling possibilities. Some researchers have speculated that Gary Mathias, who struggled with episodes of paranoia, may have experienced a psychological crisis that influenced the group's decisions. Perhaps he became convinced they were in danger. Perhaps the others trusted him enough to follow. This theory explains the sudden change in direction and the sense of urgency suggested by the abandoned car. But it still leaves gaps. Mathias himself was never found, and the trail of events after the car was left behind remains fragmented and silent. So the question lingers. What could have made 5 men leave a working car on a cold mountain road and walk into darkness without turning back? Today, the case of the Yuba County Five remains officially unresolved. Searchers eventually found remains scattered across miles of forest. The distances between them suggested exhaustion, disorientation, and slow collapse rather than a single event. But the emotional weight of the case lies not only in how it ended, but in how it began. 5 friends drove to a basketball game. They laughed, bought snacks, talked about the next day. Nothing in their lives suggested that night would be their last. The abandoned car still stands as one of the most haunting details, because it represents a moment. A moment when they stopped. A moment when they decided to get out. A moment when something, fear, confusion, or something else entirely, felt more dangerous than staying inside. That decision changed everything. The road where the car was found is still there. Quiet, winding, surrounded by forest that looks much the same as it did in 1978. At night, there are long stretches where there is no sound at all. And it is not difficult to imagine headlights turning off, doors opening, footsteps moving away into the dark, 5 sets of footprints, and then silence. What made them step out of that car? If stories like this stay with you, if you find yourself thinking about them long after the silence returns, there are more waiting to be explored. You can follow this channel to continue uncovering true stories, real mysteries, and the unanswered echoes history left behind.